You'll be hearing this in sometime later, but today's the last day of the days of unleavened. And to those on the live stream, greetings. About 15 minutes after. I know we said we usually start at 2, but unlike most days, where we have a break in between and where we have the Bible study where we just jump right into it, we did the singing and praise reports and things up front at 2 o'clock. So now we're starting about 2:15, but we're all here. Praise Yahweh. Days of unleavened, last day. And it's just a blessing. I want us to understand the blessing of understanding Yahweh's ways and his laws and the things he's revealed to us. And, when I was thinking about what to talk about, and as I mentioned Sabbath, there was some verses, and we're going to go back and read those because I didn't get to read them Sabbath, but I feel like I feel led that they apply to what we're going to talk about today. And one of the things also is for those who may be logging in and are on the live stream, or those who are on the outreach who are new to this, that this time is just not an arbitrary time, and we're not just following blindly some traditions. But when you read in Leviticus 23, and I'm not going to, you can read that for yourself, when Yahweh speaks of the Sabbath days or the feast days, the Sabbath being the first. If you notice when he goes through, a lot of the times he uses that word as a memorial, as a reminder. And we've talked about this before, and I used to always think as a reminder of what? But it's a reminder of Yahweh's plan for us. Everything he does is to lead us to his kingdom. Everything he does is so that he can fulfill, because Yahweh's going to keep his promise, and his promise to those who obey him is life. Is life, eternal life, and blessing. And so we have to have that mindset to recognize what a blessing is. And I thought about maybe, titling this, Do You Want to Live? But I decided against it and kept with Yahweh Delivers, because he does deliver his people in all situations and in all things. And for someone who's like, what is this about? It started with Passover. And that's the first act of when we read that Passover story. And if you haven't read it before, even when Israel's coming out of Egypt, it's Yahweh delivering his people from oppression. They were enslaved, they were oppressed. He delivered them from that. He gave them freedom, and he was delivering them to a place that he set aside for them so that they could live in peace and prosperity and live to serve him and obey him. And that's just a physical manifestation of a greater purpose, because we can see and touch that, but he's showing it's for a bigger plan so that we, in this day and age, instead of looking to go to a land that we can see and put our feet on, but to a place and into a realm where we will never die. Ultimate peace, ultimate prosperity, and true life with him. And, here, I can't speak for other organizations. We don't do branding. We're not advertising. To me, that's enough. The opportunity to live and to come to a place where I can learn more about what I need to do so that I can obtain that promise, I'm sold. And I think about a lot of places, they have a lot of showmanship, they have a lot of things, and like I say, it's branding. They get things to bring you in, to draw you in, and it all seems cool, but it serves the flesh, and it's fleeting, and it will go away. And when I look, Yeshua, he wasn't branding. Life should have been enough. If you want to live, follow me. That's the message from Messiah and the promise of that. But a lot of times things get in our way. Our vision gets clouded, and that's why I was not alluding, but trying to speak plainly to Sabbath, was there are so many things around us that distracts us and cause us to shy away from the business of serving our Father, to putting our efforts and our energies into other things that don't serve this life and that aren't helping us to live better lives in him. And so let's turn first to Psalms 34. Psalms 34. I'm starting verse 1. I'm just be frank. I'm going to read the whole thing, but I read kind of fast. So I thought it would kind of set the tone. Psalms 34. And there's some key things that David said, and I was going to read just spot different verses, but I just said, you know what, let's just read the whole thing. So Psalms 34, and David's writing here, And I'm going to pick up in the middle of verse 1. He says, I will bless Yahweh at all times. His praise shall always be in my mouth. And I think for a lot of us, that should be our mindset. Not I think. It should be our mindset. Verse 2, my soul shall make its boast in Yahweh. The humble shall hear and be glad. Oh, magnify Yahweh with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought Yahweh, and he answered me, and delivered me out of all my fear. They looked to him and were filled with light, and their faces were not ashamed. This poor man cried, and Yahweh heard and saved him out of all his distresses. The messenger of Yahweh camps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Taste and see that Yahweh is good. Blessed is the man seeking refuge in him. Fear Yahweh, his holy ones, for they who fear him lack nothing. The young lions have lacked and been hungry, but they who seek Yahweh shall not lack any good thing. My sons, come, or it should be children, listen to me. I will make known to you the fear of Yahweh. Who is the man who desires life? Who loves days in order to see good? And that's us. Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking guile. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of Yahweh are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry. The face of Yahweh is against those who do evil, to cut off their memory from the earth. The righteous cry, and Yahweh hears, and he saves them out of all their distresses. Yahweh is near to the broken heart, and he saves the crushed of spirit. Many are the evils, or I'm thinking someone says the trials or tribulations, depending on what translation you remember, that you're reading from. Many are the evils of the righteous, but Yahweh delivers us, or delivers him out of them all. Keeping all his bones, not one of them is broken. Evil shall slay the wicked. Yes, those who hate the righteous shall become guilty. Yahweh is redeeming the soul of his servants, and none of those who seek refuge in him shall perish. That's a strong promise and an admonition out the gate of what Yahweh does for us. And as I referred to Sabbath, when we look around at all the things going on and we feel like we have to be active and, we got to, try to change the world, so to speak, try to change the government. We fight against these leaders and things, and that's been done a long time. And has it changed the nature of man? Yes, governments have changed. We've had regimes come up and go. Kings have come and go. Some live it better than others. But what hasn't changed is the nature of man. None of them are serving Yahweh. None of them are ruling in righteousness. Even the people of Israel. Israel never had a righteous king. And Judah, it was kind of hit and miss. They had a few. Of course, we know David and others, Solomon. But my point being, that's why we're looking to that kingdom of Yahweh. And so when we look at our existence here and how we're supposed to conduct ourselves and what exactly we're supposed to do, we need verses like this to kind of give us that guidance. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. First Corinthians 10. We're going to start in verse 1. 1 Corinthians 10:1. And Saul's writing here. He says, I do not want you to be ignorant, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea. And all were baptized to Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank of the spiritual rock following, and that rock was Messiah. And it's this, what he's writing here is apropos to this time, or what we're doing, especially starting at Passover. Let's continue on. He says, yet Yahweh was not pleased with most of them, for they were scattered in the deserted place. But these things became examples for us, so that we may not be lusting after evil, even as those indeed lusted. Neither be idolaters, even as some of them, as it had been written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Nor should we commit fornication, as some of them fornicated, and 20,000 fell in one day. Neither let us tempt the Messiah, as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents. Neither should we murmur, as also some of them murmured, and perished by the hand of the destroyer. And all these things happened to those as examples, and it was written for our warning, on whom the ends of the ages have come. And I read these to for us because some of us fall into that category. Some of us murmur and complain. We like, oh, we're not idolaters. But remember, anytime we put something ahead of Yahweh, that's idolatry. When we put doing other things ahead of worshiping and serving Yahweh. When we feel like, oh, our purpose here is to recruit. Our purpose here is to advertise. Our purpose here is to, to brand so that people can come because we think we're doing it for the right reasons. We need to expand. Let's draw the people in. So we do it by telling, oh, the world is so bad out there, so bring your kids here and bring your families here, and we're going to provide that safe space. And I'm telling you from experience, I've been in organizations that have done that, and they get big and they grow, and then what happens? Split. Why? And I'll tell you, the fallout from that, what I've witnessed, has been far worse than the fallout that I see going on in the world. Because people have been brought into an organization that's supposed to be teaching the truth, and when they do something like that and fall apart, it really puts a black eye on the worship of Yahweh. And some people, they don't recover. They just walk away altogether. So he says, these happen for example. We're supposed to be learning from these things. What's our mindset? The whole part of, the Passover, like I said, that is Yahweh's, the ultimate deliverance. He delivered us through the shed blood of his son, Yahshua Messiah. We are, yes, Curtis?
Actually, we see a lot of like-minded churches or organizations like us, like what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it might be a good thing that people want to say, yeah, let's expand, let's grow, let's do this. And so many oftentimes, it is started out with the best and noble of intentions. I mean, I'll give them that. I'm not gonna debate.
Right. Well intentioned. Mm-hmm.
The point is, inevitably, some way, somewhere, somehow, they get away from what they were doing right. They go wrong. They err some way.
Mm-hmm.
That just seems to be the case. I don't have the experience with it. You did. I've seen a little bit of it.
Right. But you've experienced it. You came from an organization that's like that.
I did. I came out of CGI once many years ago. But in any case, the best type of that, I would know from Scripture, would be the Kingdom of Solomon, where Israel reached its height, and then the downside came when Solomon followed his 300 honeydew list.
Right. Trying to expand and please them. And to your point, I'll say this, is with what is the motivation and intention? Yes, we're here, but we're not out recruiting and saying, hey, if you come here, we're going to do this for you, or if you come here, we're going to do that. We just say, look, we are people who are seeking the truth, who are studying the word of Yahweh, and we seek and speak the truth that's written in Scripture and seek to follow it with Yahweh's help. That's one thing, and if people come and show up and expand, that's as Yahweh's doing. But when we create a model, that's why I'm saying it's that branding. What do we need to do to draw people in? I've heard people say that. I've heard those discussions. What do we need to do? David said something Sabbath after services. He said, it's not my place to go and point at people and tell them this is what's wrong with your life and this is where you're in error. It's kind of like if you're a male, I can only speak the male perspective. I remember in college and high school, some boys didn't have enough character. They didn't have enough, game to get the girl. So their game was, I'm going to make the other dude look worse. So instead of him just approach the girl and talk to her, he would just like, oh, why are you talking to him? And they just dog the other dude out. And that's a lot of times how the religion is. I'm going to tell you how bad everything else is so that you'll just default to me. You'll default to us. That's not the way. The way is, this is the best way. And that's how Yahweh has already said, this is the way of life. This is the best way. This is what Yahshua said. And then we choose it or not because it's still our choice. But I understand what you're saying. There are a lot of well-intentioned, and they do that because that's what they were told, right? If you look at it and say, why do we do things that way? Why is it that a group of people come together, and as soon as they get together, then the first thing they do, so how are we going to grow? We need to get more people. Then they start talking about numbers, and they start talking about, branching out and starting programs and doing these type things. And everyone falls into that same mode, and it's not taught. It's that mindset, like you said. Go ahead, Curtis.
And maybe it's just me, but it stems from a lack of spiritual maturity, if you will.
I agree. And I want all of us, and see the point I keep making, and I'm going to keep making it, it's not the responsibility of just one person here. It's everybody in this room, everybody who can hear this or is listening to this at whatever time. It's everyone's responsibility to be spiritually mature.
Prepared to defend our faith and stand up for our faith and answer why we do the things we do when it
Everybody. Yes, exactly.
we can do that to anybody and everybody.
Exactly.
But
And
we
it's
don't go out recruiting and go to other people's house and tell them everything they're doing wrong.
right. Exactly. Yes, Dave.
I was going to say, which one is easier in most people's mind? Is to work on yourself and fix the things that you need to work on, or to point out the wrong in other people?
It's easy to point out what everybody else is doing.
Exactly.
Because that reflection and that self-inspection is rough go. It's hard. And Yahweh wants us to be humble enough to do that. And, I didn't even put it down, but, there's scriptures that come to mind, even with David saying, examine me, Yahweh. Show me. And here you got the king. David was the king of Israel. Yahweh's beloved. And he was humble enough to do that, and we've got to be humble enough to do that same thing. Because then by doing that, our focus will be in the right place, and we won't be distracted by the things going on around us or focusing our energy and our efforts in areas that we should not. Because a lot of those things will take us down and lead us away from the kingdom, and the bad thing is we'll think we're still on the way, and we're not. I'm going to continue on here in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So he says, verse 11, it says, and all these things happened to them as examples, and it was written for our warning, on whom the ends of the ages have come. So that he that thinks he can stand, let him be careful that he not fall. A lot of us are too sure of ourselves. We think we got it all figured out. We're strong. So because we're so strong, we can talk about what the world is doing and just, and to what end? And to what end? When we talk about the world and what's going on in the world, how does that edify the body? That question has been asked here. I've heard Trey ask that question. I've heard Jamie. I've heard, Raquel. I've heard Chris. I've heard a lot of people ask that question. How does that edify the body? Because when I go through and look at what Yeshua spoke, everything he said was edifying. There was no random talk on his part or the top ones, the disciples. So the same thing should be us. Oh, Daniel, go ahead.
When Yeshua spoke, there was no non-salvation issues he brought up?
No, I'm saying that everything he said was for the edification of those who heard it.
Right. There was no non-salvation issues.
Right.
Right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Everything was to life, to bring people closer to the Father.
Well, this is a non-salvation issue.
Right.
There was no non-salvation issues.
Discussing for the sake of discussing. And I'm glad you brought that up, Daniel, because just this past week and this season, I've seen where people have, and I'm not even going to go because I want to distract from the message, but you've seen where people, they bring up all these what ifs, and I wonder, about different things about the Feast of Unleavens, and, questioning when Yahshua actually died, and was it actually 3 days, all these type things. Why are they doing that? And then you're like, what are you saying? They're like, oh, no, I believe in Yeshua. So what are you talking about? What is the point? I want us to talk about things that will help us look at ourselves so that we can get rid of that leaven, that seor, the thing that breaks us down, the thing that causes corruption within ourselves. So I'm going to read that verse again, verse 12. So he that thinks he can stand, let him be careful that he not fall. Verse 13, no temptation has taken you except what is human. We are in this flesh. But Yahweh is faithful, who will not allow you to be tested above what you are able, but with the trial, he will also make the way so that you may be able to bear it, or in some way of escape. On account of this, keep away from idolatry, my beloved. I speak as to prudent ones, or to the wise. You judge what I say. The cup of blessing that we bless, is it not partaking of the blood of Messiah? The bread which we break, is it not to partake of the body of Messiah? For just as the loaf of bread is one, we are all one body, for we all partake of that one bread. Let's go to Daniel chapter 11. Now, I've read this before, not here. I read it speaking to some other brethren, and I'm gonna give the same. It's not a warning, but I'll say this: we're reading some things here that are talked about in prophecy, but this is not a prophetic message. But there's a point that I want to make in this. So, if I can get there. There we go. Daniel chapter 11. I'm going to start later into the chapter because, like I said, this is part of the vision and everything that Daniel's talking about. So we're going to pick it up in verse 27. Verse 27. Yeah, and I'm going to read fast, but I want to read this for the context of what I'm about to say. So Daniel 11:27, and I'm breaking in. He says, "And both of them, or the kings, shall have in their hearts to do evil, and they will speak lies at one table, but it will not prosper, for the end still shall be at the appointed time." All right? So I wanted to read that, so note that. All right? 27. All right, I'm going to continue reading. "And he will return to his land with great wealth, and his heart shall be against the set-apart covenant, and he will act, and he shall return to his land. At the appointed time he will return and come against the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. For the ships of Kedem will come against him, and he will be grieved and turn back and be furious against the set-apart covenant, and he will act, and he will return and heed those forsaking the holy or set-apart covenant. And forces will stand away from him, and they will profane the sanctuary, the fortress. And they shall remove the continual sacrifice, and they will place the abomination that desolates. And he will defile by flatteries those who do evil against the covenant. But the people who know their sovereign, will be strong and will work." And I think it says the prudent or the wise. Verse 33, "And those who understand among the people will instruct many. Yet they will stumble by the sword and by flame, by exile and spoil for days. And when they shall stumble, they will be helped with little help, but many will join them with hypocrisy. And many of those who understand shall stumble, to refine and to repurge them, and to make white to the end, for the time of the end. For it is yet for the appointed time. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt and magnify himself above every other god. He shall even speak marvelous things against the King of kings, or the El of Els, and shall prosper until the fury is completed. For that which is decreed shall be done. And he shall not regard the sovereign of his fathers, nor the desire of women. Yes, he will not come to any sovereign, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his place he shall honor the sovereign of forces, and he shall honor a mighty one whom his fathers did not know, with gold and silver, with precious stones and desirable things. And he shall act in the strongholds and of the fortresses with a foreign Elohah, whom he shall acknowledge. He shall increase in glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for a price. And at the end time, the king of the south will engage in budding with him. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall go into the lands, and shall overflow and pass over. And he shall enter into the glorious land, and many will be stumbled. But these shall escape out of his hand, Edom and Moab, and the chief of the sons of Ammon. And his hand will stretch out against the land, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he will rule over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all Egypt's desirable things. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But news shall trouble him from the east and from the north. And he will go out with great fury to destroy, and to devote many to destruction. And he shall plant his palace tents between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to end, and there is no or not a helper for him. Let's remember that. 45. And in that time, Michael shall stand up, the great ruler who stands for the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of distress, such as not been from the beginning of a nation until that time. And at that time, your people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book. Here's this deliverance of Yahweh again. And many of those sleeping in the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to reproach, and some to everlasting loathing. And those who act wisely shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. And those turning many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book to the end time. Many shall travel back and forth, and knowledge shall be increased. And I, Daniel, looked, and behold, another two stood there, the one on this side of the edge of the river, and one on that side of the river's edge. And one said to the man clothed in linen, who was on the waters of the river, until when is the end of the wonders? So he's asked for a time frame, like, when is this going to happen? When's this going to end? And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was on the waters of the river, when he held up his right and his left hand to the heavens, and swore by him who lives forever, that it shall be a feast, or a time, and half a time. And when they were made an end of the scattering of the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. And I heard, but I did not understand. And I said, "O Master, what shall be the end of these things?" So he gave me an answer, but it still didn't make sense to him, did it? And he says, "Go, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the end time. Many shall be purified and made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly. And not one of the wicked shall discern, but the wise shall discern," or understand. Now, I read all that, and I told you to kind of key in on a couple of verses, but here's the thing. I'm not trying to decipher what all that meant, and who the king of the north, and what's going on, and all this. The point is what? It's going to be a bad time. That's the message. It's going to be bad. And there's going to be a lot going on. And there's going to be a lot of blasphemy. This person is standing up like he is a god. Take that for what you want, whether it's, people get on about AI, it doesn't matter. It's going to be a bad time. But what does it say? But the prudent, the wise, what are they going to be doing? Did it say that they're fighting against the king? It says, no, what? They're trying to edify others about the truth. Not, this is the anti-Messiah. Him, he's not following Yahweh. Whoever this person is, or whatever this government is, or whatever it is, it is not in line with Yahweh. But it talks about those who are righteous are going to walk in righteousness. And it says Yahweh will deliver them, doesn't it? And we're going to read a little bit about deliverance in a minute. And there's two things. Here, he said, it's going to come to an end. He said that in 12:10. In 11:45, he said, it's going to come to an end, and there's no one going to be able to help this king, this evil king. You know why? Because Yahweh is watching. Yahweh knows what's going on, and he's letting Daniel know, I'm going to take care of it. And the reason why I wanted to read that is because guess what, brothers and sisters? Daniel's like us. Daniel's like, oh my goodness, look at all this. When is this going to happen? And when is it going to be over with? And what's going to happen? Daniel, he's like us. I can feel that, because I would be the same way. If that was shown to me, then my first question is, so when is, I need some timetables here. Because he was given an answer, but it wasn't exact, was it? Daniel's like, I need a little bit more clarity about what's going on. Then he pretty much tells him, if you read the end, he says, well, Daniel, this is not even for you. You're going to be dead. But I need you to write it down and be a witness. So what I'm saying is, when we are in this day and age and we're looking at, oh, things are looking bad. Oh, it's getting bad, y'all. It's getting bad, y'all. But here it says, what we're supposed to be doing is not stumbling. Because it said some will stumble. Some will be offended. But we're supposed to be, I got you, Curtis, uplifting and edifying one another. Because here's the cut to the chase. It's going to end. And it's not going to end by our hand. Yahweh is going to take care of it. Maybe that's not what you want to hear, but that's the truth. And us worrying about it and us thinking that Yahweh needs our help, he doesn't. He just told Daniel here and there, Daniel, you don't even have to worry about it. You're not even going to be around. And guess what? I got you, Daniel. I got Curtis and you. And guess what? Some of us may not be around. But I know we like to see it, and I'm going to refer back to what David on Sabbath. Remember, David said, but it's our human nature. We like to see people get their comeuppance. Those evil people, all these wicked, evil, I want to see what happens to them. I want to see. But it's not. Yahweh knows exactly what's going on, how he's going to deal with it. Okay, sorry. Thank you for your patience, Curtis. Curtis and then Daniel. Go ahead, Curtis.
You got to remember we were told earlier in this little passage you just read that knowledge would increase.
Yes.
And that we have a greater knowledge and understanding of what you just read here because, like you said, like Daniel said, or the angel told Daniel, knowledge would increase.
Mm-hmm.
Because 2,000 years ago, we had the writings, we had the teachings of Joshua and the writings of all his taught ones. You know, John, Matthew, Luke, all writers of the New Testament. James, giving us a better, clearer understanding
Right.
of some of these things. Then now we got a better understanding today than what we had 100 years ago versus 200 years. Because even 200 years ago,
Right.
as certain things began to develop, we had a little bit clearer understanding. Then 100 years ago, we had
Right.
a better things things that were quite fuzzy that were still fuzzy then, but because people started making connections
Right.
with certain things.
Mm-hmm.
That seemed to make sense. I'll phrase it that way.
Exactly. Daniel, I hope you can remember what you're going to say.
Oh, just briefly, we keep talking about how it comes to an end. And it's like not our only job, but maybe our main job is just endure.
Yes.
Just endure to the end.
That's what Scripture
Because
says.
A lot of promises are
Yes.
connected to those who do endure to the end.
You're right. And that's a promise.
People fall away every day. So, people come into the faith every day, people fall away every day. You have to endure. We're tested every day.
Right.
They-
Exactly. David and Curtis. Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, I don't know if you're going to Daniel 12:3, but Daniel 12:3 kind of says that, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament or the sky.
Yes.
And they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever.
Right.
It's like you're shining because your light just penetrates through the darkness that's of this world.
Exactly.
And so if we're focused on the world, how can our light be bright?
Right.
Our light is to be a reflection of Yahweh and Yeshua,
Mhm.
not chasing down the world to see what they're doing to point out the negativity that they have in them. It's more of if we stay closer to what burns brightly, then we will shine as bright as the sun in the end times.
Exactly. Curtis and Trey.
May I take just a moment to give a small example of what I meant about the knowledge increasing and things coming in
Go ahead.
the folks. It was just a little over 100 years ago. People were having this hot debate about this being saved. Did it mean being saved alive? Is everybody on this earth really going to get killed in all this mess? Or did it mean whether the spiritual or physical thing? But then in World War II, what did we have? We saw the airplanes. In World War I, we saw the airplanes, and in World War II, we saw the atomic bomb. When we saw the atomic bomb go off, a lot of people came to think that's how. We now have the weapons to do it and the means to deliver it.
Yeah.
Now we can have these things. So these things are slowly but surely this knowledge is in fact increasing.
More than exponential.
That's just a small example.
Right. No, I know what you mean.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Trey? And then Raquel.
I was gonna say, I think that we need to key on one thing that you said specifically is that we can't do anything about it. That's not like a negative comment
Right.
at all.
It's not negative.
We can still go around. We're trying to teach. We're trying to endure. That's what we're supposed to do. But there's nothing that we can do in regards to the world. There's nothing that we can do that, like even when you're talking about trying to grow as a church group, like they had the good intentions. You want to grow to get this word out. But here's the thing: we read in Proverbs, it says, "Commit your works unto Yah, and He will establish your thoughts."
Right.
If your thoughts are to grow, and that's what you want to do. He still said, "You commit your works to me." So you're not committing your works to a standard, to a model, to I'm gonna do this program, I'm gonna outreach here, and I'm gonna blog here, and that's not what it's reaching out to. You're reaching out to Him, and He said, "I'll establish you, but you got to come to me first." Just like when you plant something, I think that's the scripture as well. You plant the seeds, you water it, but if there's no sunlight, what you growing?
Right. I was just writing, you sparked a thought, I didn't want to forget it. Go ahead, Raquel.
Yeah, no, I was
Okay.
gonna say, who's gonna be watching the come-upons in Revelation 14:10. It says, he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, in the presence of the Lamb.
Mhm.
Those are the ones who are gonna be watching the come-upons, not
Right.
necessarily us.
Because we're still in this flesh, and as long as that
Exactly.
mindset, like, oh, because we're not the judge. We don't know everything from
Not
beginning
the
to end.
judge.
And it's not for us. Once again, it kind of falls into that hypocrisy mode. We see it going on right now. The rules are always for everybody else. They have to obey the rules, but we feel like we should be able to escape because we always got an excuse about what we're doing when people point out our stuff. We always got a reason. We always got an excuse, but we don't want to hear it from other people when we point out theirs. But Yahweh's not like that. He's just and consistent all the way around. That's why, that's why I go to Yahshua. People try to tell me stuff about things. What did Yahshua say? That's what he was trying to tell the Pharisees. They go through all these rules. You got to do this and this. Oh, what you doing on the Sabbath? But if Yahshua said it's okay to do it, it's okay to do it. Because that applies to everybody. And even himself, Yahshua never once said, well, it's for me because, you know who I am. You know who my dad is. He didn't, that wasn't his attitude. He set everything in a precedent so that we could follow in his steps. And what Trey said when he said about growing, everybody wants to cause growth, in the group and the assembly and all this. But it goes back to what David said. We're supposed to grow. The growing should be for us to develop and grow. And there's nothing more encouraging than when people who are in a dark place and people who are struggling, when they see strength, when they can see wisdom and they can see strength in someone else, because we're going through the same thing, but yet you're not beat down. You're not stressed out. That brings encouragement to me when I see that in others. That's what draws people. Not programming. Let's go to 2 Peter. 2 Peter, and we're going to start in chapter 1. 2 Peter 1. We're going to pick up later in the chapter, but let's start around, I'm breaking the thought here. 2 Peter 1, and I'm going to pick up in verse 16. He says, for not following fables which have been cleverly devised, but having become eyewitnesses of the majesty of Yeshua Messiah, we made known to you the power and coming of our Master. See, that's how you edify. That's what, when Daniel's talking about bringing in others and witnessing to them, this is what this is. For he received from Yahweh, the Father, honor and majesty. When there came such a voice to him from the excellent and magnificent esteem, this is my Son, or the heavens, as it says, my Son and beloved, in whom I am well pleased. Even we heard this voice being born out of the heaven, being with him in the mountain, or in the set apart mountain. And we have the more established word of prophecy, in which you do well to look to it for guidance. That's what he said. Look to what for guidance? To the word of Yahweh for guidance. There's little things in there that sometimes we read over and miss. But too many of us, well, no, you look to me for guidance. You look to this group for guidance. We got all these pamphlets you can read. No. You look to Yahweh. You look to the word for guidance. As you look to a lamp shining in a dark place until day dawns and the sun will shine in your hearts, knowing this first, that not every prophecy of Scripture is made clear in its own book. For prophecy did not come by the will of man. I will say that again. Prophecy did not come for the will of man or by the will of man, but set apart men of Yahweh spoke when they were inspired by his Spirit, by the set apart Spirit. But false prophets were among the people, as also false prophets or teachers will be among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies. And we've talked about this word heresies before. And denying the master who has brought them, bring in swift destruction on themselves. And many will follow their destructive ways, by whom the way of truth will be evil spoken of. And by covetousness, with well-tuned words, they will use you for gain. And I think some of it says make merchandise of you, I believe. They will use you for gain, for whom judgment from the very beginning was not ceased, and their destruction is always active. For if Yahweh did not spare the angels or sending angels, but delivered them to the chains of darkness, thrust down in Tartaru, having been kept to judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah. And the 8, a herald of righteousness, bringing a flood on a world of wicked ones. And covering the city of Sodom and Gomorrah with ashes, he condemned them with an overthrow, setting an example to men intending to live unholy or unrighteous lives. And also delivered righteous Lot, who was tormented with the filthy conduct of the lawless. For that righteous one living among them day after day, and seeing and hearing, his righteous soul was tormented with their lawless deeds. But Yahweh knows how to rescue the righteous out of temptation, and to keep the unjust to be punished at the judgment day. Once again, Yahweh showing, I'm going to deal with them. Lot didn't deal with them. Lot didn't judge them and enact his own form of justice, or he didn't take over the city, did he? And especially, verse 10, where he punished those who follow after the filthy lusts of the flesh and have no respect for authority. Self-willed and arrogant they are, and they do not tremble when they blaspheme. Wow. And so I read this, and that was the other thing when someone said about deliverance and understanding what that deliverance means. Sometimes it's death. Sometimes Yahweh just removes us altogether. There's a verse in Isaiah that says he removes the righteous through death so that they don't even have to see what's coming. So we have to understand and look at life and look at our walk as Yahweh is doing that. And when I read these, because how did he remove Lot, and how did he remove Noah? Did he fix those cities? I don't even know what city Noah. I can't remember where Noah lived. And Lot, we knew he was in Sodom and Gomorrah. Yahweh didn't come and say, I'm just going to fix everything and let you stay. No, he just moved them out. And it's the same way that he's doing with us. And when he says, come out and hurt my people, Yahweh's not going to take us and put us in another part of the world. But we come out of it, out of that system of things, out of that way of thinking. Spiritually, he removes us and puts us in a place of safety. And guess what? We are protected and covered. That's why we should be walking like we are safe. We are safe in Yahweh. And we just had Passover. We just had observed Passover. And what did Yahshua say in the prayer? He said, what? I've lost none. He said, who can take from Yahweh's hand? None. So that should bring us confidence. Go ahead, Trey.
Something I heard a while ago that was kind of an interesting concept was that he asked, what is your Egypt? And he related it to the people when they were brought out of the land and they were taken to the wilderness, and how it was like, it'd been better to die in Egypt, we had food and eat, we had this in Egypt, they just kept complaining about that, and they didn't trust in him even after seeing everything that he was able to do. And relate it to how we are now, is that as you're taking this walk and everything, what are you going back to? Like, where were you delivered from, spiritually and mentally? What is your Egypt that you're, that you keep whispering about, that you keep thinking about?
Right. It was better back then.
Yeah.
And so, once again, and I say this because I want us to be aware. See, the adversary is up to his game. So what happens is, I've never heard anyone here say, I want to go back where I used to. Some have gone back. Some I've heard some like, I liked my other church because they had, we had the women's group and the men's group, and my kids had the kids group, and so I'm going back to that. That was their thing. And I hate to see that happen, to go back to false worship for that. But what I see more of, and what I'm more afraid of, is when we come to this point in our lives, in any organization, we come to this point, we're moving along, and then, no, we don't want to go back to Egypt. We do, to use Trey's analogy, we just want to bring Egypt with us. But that's how we used to do it. David and I have both had conversations. We're like, why is this a certain way? And that's how we've always done it. We need to start thinking about these things. Because I should not be the same man I was last year, or the year before, or 10 years, or 20 years ago, doing things, even in the assemblies, even in the churches. Anytime I'm reaching back and be like, we did this at a Baptist church. It was okay. Let me bring that. Is it scriptural? Go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to answer your question. It was said that Noah lived in the Mesopotamia area.
Okay.
And it's funny that, not the exact same area, but Abraham was told to come out of where his fathers lived, which was Mesopotamia.
Yeah, they are Chaldees, yeah.
Somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't fix where you are. He takes you out.
He takes us out of it.
Come out of the hurt by people.
Right.
Because he can't fix them, but he's working with you. And
Right.
Give him a place to work.
Right. Because they're not choosing to be under Yahweh's rule and subjection. So he just removes those, the righteous, out of it. Go ahead, Trey.
Just to expound on what David was just saying, also, you can't fix us either. That's all on us. There's no, you read enough, you pray enough, and then you just magically are healed and you're perfectly walking the Messiah. That's a day by day, choice by choice, second by second
Our
decision.
choices we make, right. Yeah, here's the thing. He can fix us. He's not going to. He's given us that choice. He's given us that choice because that's why, remember, Messiah, he can make these rocks praise him. I mean, he can make whatever happens, but that's the beauty about what Yahweh has established, because that's something that we have a hard time doing in any aspect of our lives, is letting go. Letting go. We're afraid to let go of our kids. We're afraid to let go of situations. We feel like we have to control. And there's certain things, yes, we have to manage and set in order. I'm not saying just live willy-nilly. Don't take me wrong. But what Yahweh's done is he has created us. And then he has turned us loose. There's laws that he's established that we can't go outside of. But the big ticket items, the big things, we have to choose. He's allowing us to do that. Go ahead, Tino.
When Mishael, Shadrach, and Abednego told the king, they said, "O king, our Elohim, he's able to save us. If his will, if he saves us, he will. But he is able to save us.
Mhm.
We will not bow down to your image."
Right.
And lo and behold, there was a fourth person in that fire with them. So it's
Yes.
interesting that they made that distinction. Said, yeah, he is able to save us. If it be his will that he will, we'll see. But
Right. Exactly. Their faith wasn't contingent on that because they trusted who he was, and they also understand that concept that deliverance could come in different fashion, in different ways, through life or through death, but they would still be delivered out of the hand of the king, one way or the other. And I read this because it shows how Yahweh does that, and everyone mentioned it. We just came out of the Passover season. Of course, that's Exodus. If those that don't know, you can read in Exodus 3, all the way 3 through 14, really. Is that whole scenario of Yahweh bringing his people out. Lot, he just mentioned Lot. You can go read that in Genesis 18. Abraham negotiated. Can you find 10 people? There was not even 10 people in the city, so what did Yahweh do? I'm going to destroy it, but he removed Lot out of it. Tino mentioned about Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, but we also have Daniel. And Yahweh delivered him from that situation. He didn't strike the king dead. He didn't do that. But what did he do? The king put him in that den, and he delivered him from those lions. Yahweh does deliver. Psalms 37. I'll read a couple of verses. Psalms 37. Just to go with what we just read here in Peter. Psalms 37. Thirty-seven. Watch the perfect and behold the upright one, for the end of that man is peace. But the transgressors are destroyed together. The end of the wicked is cut off. But the salvation of the righteous is from Yahweh. He is their strength in the time of distress. 2 Timothy 2. Second Timothy 2. And Curtis mentioned this earlier, so I'm going to read it. Verse 15 says, "Study, show yourself approved to Yahweh, a workman, not ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. But shun profane, empty babblings, for they will go on to more unrighteousness. And their word will eat like a canker, of whom Hymenaeus and Philetus, who missed the mark or who erred concerning the truth, saying the resurrection already has come and overturned the faith of some." So he just gave an example, just teaching something that's a lie and causing others to stumble. Verse 19, "However, the foundation of Yahweh stands firm, having this seal: Yahweh knows the ones that are his, And let everyone who calls on the name of Yahweh depart from unrighteousness. Yahweh knows us who are his. 2 Thessalonians 2. Second Thessalonians 2. Let's pick it up in verse 8. I know this is one of Curtis's favorite chapters. 2 Thessalonians 2. Let's pick it up in verse 8. It says, "And then the lawless one will be exposed, whom our master Yahshua Messiah will consume by the spirit of his mouth and will destroy by the brightness of his presence. His coming is due to the working of Satan in all power and miraculous signs and what? Lying wonders. And in all deceit." In 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 10 now. "And all deceit of I'll start over again. And in all deceit of unrighteousness, and those who will perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth in order for them to be saved. And because of this, Yahweh will send to them a working of deception for them to believe the lie, that those not believing in the truth, but who have delighted in unrighteousness, all may be damned. But we ought to thank Yahweh always concerning you, brothers, beloved, of Yahweh or by Yahweh, because Yahweh chose you from the beginning to salvation and sanctification of the Spirit and through a true faith, in which he called you through our preaching to be the esteem of our Master Yahshua Messiah. So then, brothers, stand firm and strongly hold the commandments you were taught, whether by word or by epistle. But may our Master himself, Yahshua Messiah, and our Master and Father, the one having loved us and having given everlasting comfort and good hope by what? Grace or loving kindness, encourage your hearts, and may he establish you in every good word and work. That's the message. Not distracting one another with, have you heard what's going on lately? We can see that. I'm not, and don't get me wrong, let me be clear. I watch the news. I read what's going on. But if the news is bringing you down, if it's causing you stress, if looking at across your neighbors is causing you stress, if looking at the internet is causing you stress and it's causing you to feel some kind of way, that's doubt. That is unbelief. Because I don't read where any of the prophets, I don't read, when Yahshua cried, why was he crying? When he looked over the city, why was he crying? Was he crying because they were occupied by the Roman military or the Roman government? He's like, oh man, this is terrible what's going on in the world right now. No, he cried because he said what? He was talking about Jerusalem. He's talking about Israel. You don't recognize what's going on right now. Your king is here. They did not recognize who Yahshua was. The people who were supposed to know him did not know him. He was not crying for the state of the world. None of the prophets came and were crying and wailing. They gave advice, and they're like, you can listen if you want to. Remember Daniel? How many kings did Daniel go through? 4. Was Daniel stressed? Like, man, these kings, I don't know why they don't listen to me. They keep on getting killed. If they would just listen. No, he's like, look, I told the other one he didn't listen. This one didn't listen either. The 4th one kind of caught the hint. That's not what was stressing him out. What was bothering him was the unrighteousness of his people. And in his prayer in Daniel 9, what did he say? He said, I'm asking you this, Yahweh, not what? Because of our righteousness, but because of your great mercy. And so when we're talking about the collective responsibility in our mindset, we're not here to look to one person to lead us and inform us. No, we are all responsible. And Curtis said, and we just read it, we're supposed to be able to speak of the salvation, of our hope that lies within us. What drives us and what motivates us. There's a lot of atrocities. There's a lot of things that can make you mad about history, about things going on in the world. Here in America, all the discrimination and the unjust things that have gone on. And not just 100 years ago. There's people in jail right now that are innocent. There's people that we have executed that died for a crime they didn't commit. That is unjust. I don't want to hear about, well, they did that. That's, once again, we have to look at it through Yahweh's eyes. That is unjust. that whole, well, I'm sure they did something or they've done something before. We just didn't get them for that. We got them for this. That's not how Yahweh rules. That's not even in the law. That's why he says you have to have witnesses. So I don't want to hear that. It has to be just. It has to be right. And we got enough in our own country, and that kills me. And then people are like, I want to go live somewhere else. Why? They're worse. So we're really going to spend all our time, I got you, Cassandra, worrying about all that, or just say, you know what? Yahweh has done all these things for us and blessed us. He's going to lead us. He's going to deliver us out of this. And he has. Our mindset. They don't serve Yahweh. That's why they act the way they act. And I hate to see it, but praise Yahweh that he has his hedge of protection around his people. Go ahead, Cassandra.
You know, what in reference to what you're saying now, compared to your last message, it's always been bad.
Yes.
And people say it's worse, this is worse, it was so much better when I was younger. It was
Right.
So much, but it was always bad.
It was always bad. And that's why it cracks me up when that's why I try, and I say that, and I'm not pointing at someone, but I want us to think about life. We got Cassandra in here. We got Karan in here. We got my mom. My mom is 90 years old. These are black women. Ask them when in America it was good. Ask them, was the 40s good for them? Were the 50s good for them when they couldn't vote? When as grown women like my mom, she couldn't even ride on the bus. She had to sit in the back. Yeah, she was in that era. When people could talk crazy to you and just treat you as nothing. When you weren't allowed to when your reward for going to work is not a pay raise, but now you've been working with blacks, now you can work with a white person. That's your reward. So somebody else, you tell me, that's when America was great? That was a good time? For who? It wasn't for them. But we have to have that love because you know what? My mom didn't raise me to complain. She never complained. She's not resentful. She never speaks with venom about those times. In fact, one of the people that talked crazy to her and did that, she said, I'm going to pray for you. And I know she has. I've witnessed it. So, to Sandra's point, it's been bad. It's been bad for different people, for different groups at different times. And like I said, I'm not belittling or magnifying. What I'm saying is we are moving forward. And people can go further than that, talk about how bad it was. What I'm saying is, but for the people of Yahweh, he brings us out. And a lot of that coming out is that change that mindset because it can be infuriating. I have been mad when I've been pulled over for no reason and had a gun pulled on me. It's maddening. And that can stick with you, and it sticks with a lot of people like me because when they don't have Yahweh and they don't have that way of release and that venting and letting that go and that spirit of forgiveness and praying for those who don't understand, it eats at them. And that's why we have all this ridiculousness going on now. People losing their job and they coming back shooting up the place. People being mistreated or hurt and pain stays with them. And they come back 20 years later when everyone else has forgotten about it, but they have it because it's been underneath the surface. But it's not with us. This is deliverance, y'all. We don't understand it. This is some of the deliverance, and this is what Yeshua did at Passover through his death so we can be delivered from those things that kill us and that tear us down and eat at us. Go ahead, Raquel.
No, I was just going to say, it's like ridiculous to watch in Israel. They're talking about in Israel, the holiest week with 3 different religions, and it's the most violent week.
Right.
I was like,
They're getting
those two don't
bombed.
go together,
The holiest week, and they're just getting bombed.
Exactly. Because they're all fighting.
Right. And so I want us to realize, and what I'm saying is to look at it so that we can recognize our blessings of what Yahweh has done for us. Our deliverance is our mental health, is our actual health, is our sanity, is our ability and capacity for forgiveness and love, not just for the ones that are in the room with us. It's easy to love the brethren. This is easy. I love everyone I'm looking at. What's not easy is loving out there. And that's why we have to remember Romans 5, and Raquel read it just the other day during David's message, that he loved us when we were his enemy, when we were the most terrible. Jeremiah 15. I'm almost done. I want to read a couple of. I wasn't going to read this, but it came to mind with what I was just saying because our mindset. Jeremiah 15. I'm going to start in verse 1. We're just going to read the first 6 verses. Jeremiah 15, verse 1. And Yahweh speaking, and no, we're not physical Israel, but I'm talking about the essence of what he's saying, the concept of what he's saying. 15:1, it says, Then Yahweh said to me, this is Jeremiah, though Moses and Samuel stood before me, my soul could not be toward this people. Send them out from before my face. Yes, let them go out. And it shall be, if they say to you, where shall we go? Then you would tell them, so says Yahweh, those to death, and those for the sword to the sword, those to famine, and those to captivity, captivity. And I will set over them 4 kinds, says Yahweh, the sword to kill, the dogs to drag off, the birds of the heaven, and the beasts of the earth to devour and to destroy. And I will make them a horror to all the kings of the earth, or kingdoms of the earth, because of Manasseh, the son of Hezekiah, king of Judah, for what he did in Jerusalem. For who shall have pity on you, O Jerusalem, or who shall weep over you, or who shall turn aside to ask your welfare? I mean, who's going to ask about you? You have forsaken me, says Yahweh. You have gone backwards. So I will stretch out my hand against you and destroy you. I am weary of repenting. I'm tired of you being sorry. That's what he's saying. And the reason why I read that, because no, we're not under king, but Yahweh says what? When you say, well, where shall we go? He said, well, you've been so occupied about this other stuff. That's where you go. Sword, starving, captivity. And what I'm saying is that we're, instead of focusing on Yahweh, but we're going backwards by focusing on other things other than his word and how we can grow in the word. That's going to be us. We cannot go backwards. We got to look forward. We got to go forward in him. Yahweh's all about progress. And we have to understand when we are showing that lack of faith and we were doing that backslide and thinking that the things out there in the world is greater than Yahweh and his word. It's not. Yes, Trey?
Almost sounds like self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. So Yahweh's like, let me just remove the mystery. Ezekiel 14. We read this with Dennis. So this is a quick reminder. Ezekiel 14. Let's start in verse 12. Very similar, except he uses, and when you think about Samuel and Moses, both of them, you know, Moses led the people out. They saw what Yahweh could do for them, and they still doubted. Samuel's like, hey, y'all, you have Yahweh as your king. You all seen how he could protect us. He's looking out for us. And they're like, nope, we want to be like the world. And that same mentality exists too often in the assemblies. We have seen, or at least we say we've seen, maybe we're just following the crowd. But we should see how Yahweh has blessed us and what Yahweh has done for us. And then something happens in the news, and then we're like, hey, y'all, did you see this? Did you hear it? That spreads. There are some brethren that don't share any scripture, but they will sure share what's going on out there, but won't share a scripture. Think about that. How are we going to do what David just mentioned about what we read in Daniel? How are we going to turn to others and comfort others? That's not comforting. The word is comforting. And every time those who are supposed to know and understand Yahweh's greatness, they're like, no, we want something else. Samuel's group wanted to be like everyone else. Too many in the assemblies want to be like everybody else. They're not asking for a king, but let's get at this, because that's what the other churches got. That's the same mentality. Not because we need it, not because it's scriptural, but because that's what the other churches do. Yes, David?
Many of us think that being wise means knowing what the world is doing.
Right.
Knowing what other people are writing about scripture.
Mhm.
Knowing stuff that's outside of just the book itself. No, being wise and knowledgeable and righteousness comes from Yahweh's word.
That's right.
Not man.
Right.
In any form or fashion.
That's right. I'm going to repeat that because David made a good point. He said, being wise is not knowing because you've got the latest breaking news article, or because you know things about what man is talking about or what man's doing. True wisdom, as Scripture said, it comes from Yahweh. It's what Yahweh gives and gives us. That's that knowledge and wisdom. Trey?
I'll say to expound on that a little bit more, I would say wisdom is the application. Like we have the information you can gain, you can get your knowledge, and then you get understanding, and then to apply that is when you reach the level of wisdom.
Right. I used to put at the end of my emails, knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are fruit, but wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. That's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Just because you know something doesn't mean you always have to do it. Ezekiel 14, I'm going to read a couple of verses. Let's pick it up in verse 12 here. I'm breaking in once again. So in verse 12, the word of Yahweh came to me. This is Ezekiel. Now Ezekiel, there's a little overlap with Ezekiel and Jeremiah, but he's a little bit younger than Jeremiah. Ezekiel says, the word of Yahweh came to him. Verse 13, and Yahweh said, Son of man, when a land sins against me by treacherous betraying, then I will stretch out my hand on it, and I will shatter the staff of bread to it, and I will send famine on it, and I will cut it off from man and beast. And though these three men were in its midst, Noah, Daniel, and Job, by their righteousness they should deliver only their souls. Only themselves, declares the sovereign Yahweh. If I make evil beasts go through the land, and they bereave it, and it is desolate, so that no one go through it because of the beasts, though these three men were in it, as I live, declares the sovereign Yahweh. Yahweh is not playing around. He is swearing by himself, and he is establishing who he is. He says, as I live, they would deliver neither sons nor daughters. They would only deliver themselves, but the land would be desolate. Or if I bring a sword on the land and say, let a sword go through the land, and it cut off man and beast from it. Even though these three men were in the midst, as I live, declares the sovereign Yahweh, they should not deliver sons nor daughters, but they only would deliver themselves. Or if I send a plague into the land and pour out my fury on its blood to cut it off from the man and the beast, though Noah, Daniel, and Job were in its midst, as I live, declares the sovereign Yahweh, they would deliver neither son nor daughter. They, by their righteousness, would deliver only their souls. Their righteousness, their lives. For so says the sovereign Yahweh, how much more when the four of my evil judgments, sword, famine, beast, and plague, I send in Jerusalem to cut it off from man and beast. Yet behold, there shall be left in it escaping ones. Oh, he just said that basically there'll be a remnant to basically bear witness. So why am I reading this? Once again, we always think, oh, we're going to do this, and we're concerned about everyone else, and I've got to inform it. Look, we all, as Daniel said, when we read in the book of Daniel, not to be confused with Daniel sitting in the back, we read in the book of Daniel, when he was writing, those who were to lift up and encourage those other ones, that includes our children. We're not going to be able to save them by proximity. And so another purpose of this message when I'm reading this is so that we all take that responsibility, because guess what? That is the only way any of us are going to receive that salvation, is if we are doing and walking in Yahweh. You don't get it any other way. And Yahweh's saying that these people, these men whom Yahweh favors, can only save themselves. And we are only going to be able to be responsible and accountable for ourselves. And that's why our walk and our disposition and how we carry ourselves is so important. It's so meaningful. 2 Timothy 4. And I got one more verse after this. 2 Timothy 4. Oh, I already read that. I outsmarted myself. Oh, I was like, oh, I'm glad you said something. I was looking at 2 Timothy 4. I was about to say, how did that happen? 2 Timothy 4, verse 14. And this is Saul writing, and he's explaining what's going on here. So I'm going to read this real quick. In verse 14, he says, because he's talking to the brethren, and he says in verse 14, Alexander the coppersmith showed many evil things to me, or treated me evilly. Yahweh give back to him according to his works. You also be on guard against him, for he greatly withstood our words. Verse 16, in my first offense no one was beside me, but all deserted me. May it not be held against them. But the Almighty, Yahweh, stood with me and gave me power, that through me the preaching might be fulfilled and all nations might hear, and I was delivered out of the mouth of the lion. And Yahweh will deliver me from every wicked work and will save me for his heavenly kingdom, to whom be the esteem forever and ever. And I read that because that mindset, that last line right there, that the same thing, Yahweh, that's what he does for us. And he will continue to do for us no matter what's going on, to deliver us. So I'm in here in 1 Peter chapter 1. Read the last verse. 1 Peter I'm going to start in verse 3. After his greeting, 1 Peter 1, verse 3, he says, blessed be a sovereign and Father of our Master Yahshua Messiah. He, according to his great mercy, have regenerated us to a living hope. And I know I read this the other day, but I want to read it again. Through the resurrection of Yahshua Messiah from the dead, because of this time that we're in. To an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled and unfading, meaning it's eternal, having been kept in heaven for you. And that's, he's talking to us, kept in heaven for us. While you were kept by the power of Yahweh, being guarded through faith to a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. That's what we're looking forward to that kingdom. And so, you know, I hope the point was clear when I said Yahweh delivers. Yahweh does deliver us. We need to pray for that discernment to see how he's delivering us. We need to pray for that discernment that we don't get distracted. And what I'm saying with all the things, my point is, no matter what's going on around us, Yahweh will deliver us from that. That is not where we put our energy. Our energy is to walk in righteousness to him. And not to let others also pull us down and to think that that's our mission here is to do something about it. No, because we're not. And what I've shown was men through the ages have not become righteous because someone came over and took over their city or their town. But what Yahweh has done, and we read those verses, he has constantly brought his people out of the situation. He has constantly delivered his people. And each time, these people end up being beacons and lights and examples that we can look to for encouragement. And in this time, Yahweh's will that people can see us and look to us for encouragement as we walk in his light and obedience to his word. Any questions or comments? Anything I need to go back and explain? No? All right, well, praise Yahweh. Oh, are there any questions or comments, David, on anything I need to address? Okay. So if you made a comment on the message, I'll just have to read it and get back to you. So we'll be back Sabbath, where Curtis and David will be giving the Bible study and the main message. And until then, at 1 o'clock, Daylight Savings Time, Central. Daylight Savings Time, and until that time, Yahweh bless.